Today's topic is building a chord. Now, I've built several chords over the past few months. I know for certain I haven't done a C7 chord, so that's the one we're going to be doing today. A lot of chords over the years, I have realized when we play bar chords, and a lot of the open chords have a root fifth, root third orientation all the time. Never fail. Most of what we play, especially bar chords, are just that. Root fifth, root third. There is also another alternative to play. There's root third fifth. Now, C, for example, is root third fifth. Like that. And then the root repeats. Root, third, fifth, root. That chord, as well as G major, is also that. So let's look at G major. Root, third, fifth. And then at the highest note, there's two ways that typically people play G major. They either add this note here on the third fret, which is another fifth, or the open B string, which is another third, and then we have another root. So 3 roots total. We have this root here, the open root, string G, and the high root here. Now both of these strings are tuned to E, so that tells me that when I play a note here, it's the identical note here, an octave, 2 octaves higher. The way with the extra fifth. Now to get back to my point, this is root third fifth. That's 2 ways to spell it. Every single chord fundamental is that. It's either going to be root third fifth or it's going to be root fifth, root third. The vastness of learning guitar makes it hard for people to want to learn theory. It just seems like it's this huge universe. If we can reduce it down to something as simple as root fifth, root third, and root third fifth, things seem to be less vast. A lot of this is just notes repeated. Just as in a snapshot, there's 7 fundamental chords in every chord family. Chord family is my favorite way to call a key. When I say key, it doesn't really specify a lot. It could be a piano key, right? It's just not self-explanatory enough. That's why I like to say chord family. Makes sense. We all have families. We all have relatives, siblings in mom and dad and in those families. So that just seems more relatable to me. There's only 7 fundamental chords in every chord family. And those chords, those 7 chords, have a root, third, and a fifth. There's only 3 notes in each of those chords. Those 7 chords can be used in every single chord family. However, 1 or 2 of the notes, or sometimes 3 of the notes, are going to have a sharp or a flat. But if you just ignore the sharp and flat for just a minute, there's only 7 spellings. Let that sink in and see if you can utilize that information and explore it perhaps to just give you a different perspective on how to reduce the overload of information on the guitar. One more point I want to make. The piano is just one lateral line of notes. We could call it horizontal, right? It's just one big line of horizontal notes. It's much easier for us to see. There's a G, there's a G, there's a G. Now I have key stickers on my keys because when I teach voice lessons, I like the students to be able to see what note they're singing. And it's also nice to have. I know where all the notes are on the piano, but I just love being able to see them all visually there like that. It's not cheating. At least by my standards, it's not cheating. If you think something's cheating on music, what are you talking about? We're not taking a test here, right? You're not in a theory class and you got all the answers there, right? This is different. However, on the guitar, there's more than one direction of notes we can play. We can play horizontally, just like the piano, but we can also play vertically, this way. Therein lies one of the bigger hurdles about learning the guitar. On top of that, we're also ramming our soft flesh into these steel strings. Most likely they're going to be steel. If they're nylon, then they're a little bit softer. Usually nylon is used for classical guitars. Now, all that being said, I'd like to come back to why we're here, why I'm talking to you about building a chord, and I decided to do C7. Now, we can play C7 here. We can actually build a C7 off of this open C chord. Now, in my previous videos, when we do 7th chords, I'm usually asking that person to identify the 2nd root, because when we create a 7th chord, there's now introduced a new tone or a new note. note. So now we have 4 different notes in there as opposed to 3. We're not repeating any of these notes. There's actually 4 different notes now. That's what gives a certain type of 7th chord that additional color. I usually say, hey, let's find the second root, and we're going to replace that second root with a note, either a half step above or a whole step above or a half step down, depending on what type of 7th chord we're needing. In this case, in a dominant 7th chord, you want to take the second root and you want to lower it a whole step to get that. However, when I play this, my second root is here, and when I let go of this, that's only a half step, so I have no room to play that full whole step. So that doesn't apply. What I'm teaching doesn't apply on this particular chord. Now, there's way more instances where my method works 90% of the time. So that's why I chose this, because I can talk about in a little more detail about my thought process behind building a 7th chord here. The thing I'm going to highlight here is when you're building a 4-note chord, there are crucial notes to keep and there are notes we can dump. The fifth is only a stabilizer. It is not a deal breaker and identifier of the chord, so we can leave it out. So in this case, I can actually remove the 5th from this, keeping the 2 roots. The 3rd. The root of obviously is going to be a huge identifier. It's basically the first name. It's your first name. If you take your first name off and you just keep your last name, we don't know which last name person you are. It could be any of the people in your family, or even people that are somebody you're not even in your family circle. So we have to keep the root. We have to keep the 3rd. Why? Because the 3rd determines if it's minor or major. So that has to stay. The 5th, if we remove the 5th, doesn't matter. The chord is still identifiable by the root in the 3rd. Now, if we make this into a 7th chord, the 7th chord has to be there. Obviously, if it's not there, it's not a 7th chord, so that needs to stay. So here is our C chord. Here's the 5th is actually here. It's the open G string. So I'm actually going to cover that G string with a different note, and that note happens to be a B flat. Now, that's probably something you might not know off the top of your head, that a C7 chord has a B flat in it. That is the kind of the barrier probably in between somebody who has been studying theory for a while and somebody who's just getting involved into theory, or not theory at all. They just remembered the shape and they don't know why that note is there. That's completely acceptable. How can we figure out why this B flat is there and is a dominant 7 chord? So that's what we're talking about. When we say C7, we're actually also saying C dominant 7. We just don't say dominant because people like to make things easier to say in passing. Instead of saying C dominant 7, we get rid of the dominant and say C7. Then if it's a major, we say C major 7, or we say C minor 7. So there's really not too much logic to that, why we took the dominant 7 out. Sometimes you'll see DOM 7. I just say both, especially because I'm always teaching this stuff. So we're actually going to add a B flat here. Now, right away, you could probably recognize that sound, that feeling. It has a very, I would say, slightly dissonant, slightly dramatic sound to it. So what I did was I covered up the G string with a note, a whole and a half step above. This is a half step. This is a whole step above. Let's look at it in a different light, because if I were to play a C chord here, this is my root 5th, root 3rd orientation. And this one's a lot easier to see, the process in which we get that B flat. So if I were to play it like this, so you can see the notes a little bit better, we have root 5th, root 3rd. Now what we need is the second root, which is here. That is the note we're going to eliminate in this case. And we're going to eliminate it and replace it with a note a whole step down. There you go, and aha, that note is B flat. Yay. But bar chords are a love-hate relationship, even with the people who like to play bar chords. I have no issue with bar chords unless I'm playing them for 30 minutes straight on an acoustic guitar. I don't like bar chords, but I do not care about bar chords on an electric guitar because it doesn't hurt my hand either way. It's not very taxing on my hand. So just keep that in mind when you play bar chords. It's easier on this electric guitar because the string are closer to the fretboard. There's less pressure required. So there is my B flat. My B flat. I could also show you in another way. It may or may not resonate or make sense to you. But if I were to stack these notes across and show you how a dominant 7 chord is built from the root. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of the word intervals, but an interval is basically just the distance between two notes. That's it. So in this case, a 4-note chord has 3 intervals of a third. Now, the third between each of those, each third of that can be either a major third or a minor third. A major third is comprised of 2 whole steps. So in this case, from C to E, that's 2 whole steps in distance. You see that? It's probably easier to see it this way. There's a first whole step, and here's the second whole step. A minor third is 1/2 step less, so it's a whole step and a half step. Hear that? There's minor. There's major. You hear the emotional difference between those two? Hopefully you understand what a major and minor third is and why we're delving into these thirds to build a C7 chord. A dominant 7 chord is major third, minor third, minor third. So, right, I said a 4-note chord has 3 intervals in it, has 3 third intervals. We're focusing on third intervals only, not fourth, not fifths, none of that. Well, say it one more time. A major third, a minor third, and a minor third. So if I were to take C here, a major third between 2 strings looks like this. As you can see, it's down a string and it's back a fret. So it's back a half step. That's a major third. Right there, I already have my first interval for building a dominant 7 chord. Okay, now what did I say the next third was? It was a minor third. Minor third is down a string and back 2 frets. Right? That is root third fifth. I just moved it from this area to here because I need more space. Okay, and the final third I said was also another minor third. So it's the same thing. You go down a string. Now I'm talking about down as in direction, not pitch. We're actually going up in pitch when we go this way. This is up in pitch, but down in direction. Don't get too confused. It's like we're flying an airplane here. Okay, so I need to make another one of these. There you go. Now that's cool. If you're able to see that and you can repeat that over top, let's say somebody's strumming that C7 chord, you can go. That's cool. Look how much distance you just traveled there, right? Nice. Now look at that. Even though it takes more effort and more distance to travel, it's a lot easier to see the thirds being stacked. It's all about stacking thirds here. Major third, minor third, minor third. Now, as a guitar chord, this would not work, obviously. I could do it, but that is not something that's not sustainable. Right? So, what do? We move notes to compact them down into a smaller area. When I want to change chords, it's much easier. This is not happening. The great thing about this chord, I call this an A string shape because my lowest note I'm utilizing is on the A string. So this is an A string shape that can move. So my root is always here, so that tells me what the name is. So all I got to do is really say, if I know at least one note on the A string, I can just go up in the alphabet or down in the alphabet and say, I need a D7 chord. Okay, I know a C7 chord is here. Here's C sharp. Here's G7. There you go. I can do the same thing here. That little stacked third sequence is also movable, so you can play that. Boom. We also have an E string shape. We can also play that and slide that. We also have a D string shape, right? Most people don't play this one. They don't play this as a bar chord. Mostly it's the A string shape and the E string shape. I would not shy away from this. You don't have to play it like this. You don't need this finger here. You can just use these because this is a complete chord with root fifth and third. This is actually fifth root third. This is a G chord. Now this is the reason why I'm doing a long form here, is so I can go down some rabbit holes with you, hopefully make some sense. Now what I did was I showed you an open C7. This is also movable. The root is on the lowest note, so you can do the same exact thing. You can move it. and you always know what name it is if you're keeping track. That's the name of the chord. So A7, here's 12th fret, that's an A. That's an A7. There's another A7, an open A7. You might know that one. So now you have two. How am I going to explain to somebody that what's a repeatable method that I can use to explain to somebody about creating this? Because the funny thing is, this is like the exception to the rule. So exceptions to rules are usually having to be, I don't want to say it, but memorized. I hate that word. I don't like saying memorized. Memorized doesn't do anything for me. When I memorized stuff in school, I was like, here we go. I'm going to memorize this for one test. And then when I walk away from that test, that information is out the window because I have more important things I want to stuff into my brain. So I don't like using memorize. So that's my challenge. How am I going to present this to somebody that's going to give them that little aha, like I get it? Because right now I don't have anything like that that's going to make you go aha, I get it. This one, playing it here, certainly does, because this is going to work for every chord, every note I slide here. Right, this one not so much. When I say root 5th, root 3rd, find the second root, replace it with a note, a whole step down. That's very repeatable and understandable right off the bat. And my shorts have done pretty well explaining it that way. But now I want to challenge myself and say, okay, well, this is a really good shape to use. At least for me, it's really easy on the fingers. I can move it, I can identify it, I can play different spots with it. So it is a movable chord. So how are we gonna get this to make sense for somebody? I think the best way to do it is to show them the one that works already. Like I did, I actually did that for you already. Is to play this one, show the process, find the second root, replace it with a note, a whole step down, and there it is. And I say you can also play this as an open shape. Since we know now that we discovered that this note works, that this note is the note included in this shape, the C7 shape, we just have to identify it. So we have to go to, okay, let's count up. Let's do it the slow way, right? We just go to the open G string, then we go to G sharp, then we go to A, then we go to A sharp. Right? Oh, there's another thing. Oh, it's an A sharp. It's not a B flat. Well, yeah, it's the same exact note with two different names. So it has another alias. So it'd also be a B flat. Now, why wouldn't I call it an A sharp? That's another thing I might have to explain. So when you spell out a chord, like in this case, we have C, E, G, B flat. The alphabetical distance has to be a third. So if I go C, E, G, A sharp, G to A, no matter if it's A sharp or not, that's just a second. That's a second. Or a flat. It's a flatted third. But if we call it a flatted third, then it is a B flat. So that's where I think that's where people, as far as theory goes, if they don't know their theory, they don't know what they don't know. So that might get a little dicey. So I could easily talk myself into a theory hole where I understand what I'm talking about, but the person that's listening doesn't. So if there's a quick way that I can do it, I need to figure that out. Hopefully, as I'm editing the video, I can come up with a overlay chart that works, and I'm gonna try it. I really actually don't know until I create a finished product. So if I go through and edit everything, I watch it back and I go, yeah, that works, or no, that might not work, then I have to go back to the drawing board. But that's my initial decision I'm gonna make. I'm gonna build a overlay for that person to visualize and see that C, E, G, A sharp is not the proper way to spell the C7. You need to call it a B flat, and hopefully people get that. So now that I've figured out a plan of action for showing them how to build a C7 chord in that way, I also like to incorporate a riff that is using the chord that I decided to teach. So now that is what I would do next. I have to figure out a riff that uses C7. Now I'll probably strum the chord like that, and then I could play exactly what I showed you before, the stacked third. I could start with that as an entrance into the little riff. And then when you're playing a dominant 7th chord, you can play minor pentatonic. So I could use a minor pentatonic lick of some kind, which I probably will do, or a blues scale. So, we have this. Right, this is what I consider a boxed-in scale, right? One that puts you in a cage. You can make it sound good, but I prefer to show people not that boxed stuff because everyone has seen that. I try to show a way to break free from that, so I'll maybe use 2 notes of that pentatonic minor scale. But we are going in this direction, are we not? So why would I go up here and play something? I want to kind of be efficient in this way. So I want to do something over here Now, what is my blues scale pattern here, right? That's what I need to know. Where is the one Now, over the years, I have spent time learning the positions for all the minor pentatonics. That's not something that I initially did. It's kind of like eating kale, right? It's like if you want to be healthy, you eat kale. That's just a really poor example. But what I say, you don't want to exercise, but you exercise because it keeps you healthy, right? So I kind of look at it as a means of guitar health, if that's even a thing. It's my personal rite of passage by learning all those stupid boxes, and I do find them useful. But I think only when you get to a certain point in your guitar journey that they're even useful, and it's not something I would teach anyone anymore. I used to show them a box and play it, and you can make notes and solo. That's no longer a way of teaching that I use. It's garbage. It's in the trash. It deserves to stay in the trash. So here's the one that I have. We have this, right? So we have. See, now I'm just gonna play around. The little riff doesn't need to be very long, and it shouldn't be very long in this. I'm doing a short, so I cannot spend a lot of time riffing on things. I want to come up with something that sounds flavorful, not just mundane. Like, not something that's just like, I want to have a little bit of creative flair when I make this. Like, I like that. That could work. But I have to remember to use this. So let's do something like that. I'm going to use a chord, the 5 chord, C, D, E, F, G. So 5 letters away from C, which is my home base. I'm going to use the G7 as a means to pull me back to C. Right now, I just stayed in C the whole time. We want to go to let's do that right there. So you hear that? A little bit of a resolution. Tension resolution. Now that could be too long, so let's see if I can figure out a way to make it a little more succinct and shorter. All right, let's go with that. That works. Let me know in the comments if you like this type of long form stuff where I'm just candidly talking about things. Let me know if you learned something. Let me know if it was too much information, if you're still in the dark. The more you tell me, the better I can become as a teacher. All right, later.